Hey, what's going on? Welcome back. This is episode 3. Thank you all for tuning in. If you've been tuning in, if this is your first episode, welcome. Again, my name's Rashad. For those of you who just tuning in today, this is your first episode. Thank you. Welcome. She's decided she wanted to come say welcome to y'all this morning as well. So, a few things I want to discuss today is going to be really simple. I want to start off by talking about how to get started, where to start at, and that's from the perspective of how to present yourself on paper. And then we're going to transition to engaging in your craft, and then a little bit of what I'm doing and where I'm at with the concept of discussing your worth and getting your worth back out of things. So that's going to be kind of an overview. And as always, I'm leave out with a little bit of my personal opinion, my personal message on some motivational aspects and things of that nature. So, if this is your first time, hopefully, you hear some of these words and you can freak it and, do some of those things that you need to do on your own to make it what you want. Because as discussed before, I don't want to act like I'm the authority on things. I don't want to say that I know best because I don't really know. I'm just doing this to kind of share my experience. But without further ado, let's get into this concept of present yourself on paper and getting started. So, first thing I think most people need to do when looking at it is evaluating, what would be the best platform they need to really sell themselves. So there's this big issue about, resume versus CV, right? And a lot of people don't really know what a CV is, especially here in America, because we don't actually use CVs that much. It's like kind of a specific audience of people who build CVs. Those are normally people in academia or kind of individuals who went up to a terminal degree of some type of doctorate level, so have you. But it's not exclusively reserved for them. And I'll talk about some type of professions that you could use a CV for, or how to convert your resume into a CV to really sell yourself. But then you have the resume, which most people are really kind of familiar with at some point in time in their life. They build a resume or had someone build it for them. So the point is you got to learn how to differentiate. It's like resumes, for the most part, are a shortened version of a CV in that sense, where it really highlights those areas of focus, those that you want to kind of bring to the forefront to get consideration for a position. So there are some rules about resumes. Some are spoken, some are, kind of just those rule of thumbs type concepts. But from my experience, this is what I've noticed as being really common as a good way to present yourself on a resume. So for starters, right, resumes should be one page. It's tempting to kind of put in as much as you can about yourself because, this is your first impression and at times your only shot. But the one page resume standard really holds out really well in the society. These hiring managers, especially now, are getting bombarded with resume after resume after resume, right? And you got a 3-page resume, nobody wants to read it. You probably don't even want to read a 3-page resume, right? So, be honest and try to keep your resume down to a single page. One really good strategy to do that is only including relevant information and information within the last 10 years. So, for some people, they graduate high school, they never really go into higher education. And that's fine. So at that point, you could include your high school education, showing that you either have a diploma or a GED or some form of equivalency or what have you. So you can always include that part. But if your job isn't based off your education, format that to where it's a little bit lower on the page. You want to present your best and your strongest argument at the top of the page, right? Because again, hiring managers, they're screening, so they want to see the most important part first. Don't make them look for it. So when you're doing that and you're putting up your job information, only really include jobs within the last 10 years that you had. Now, if you had a job for 10 years, you were at one company or one organization, then it's okay to go back a little bit further to the job just prior to that 10 years, but don't focus too much on it. Don't write out 3 or 4, action items or responsibilities you held during that time, because that was quite a period of time ago. So, really put one sentence in there. I was a manager. I learned this. I controlled that. I ran this program or whatever. Excuse me. Come on, Caesar. Sit down. You'll be here. Sit. All right. Down. Not on me. Okay. But outside of that, right? Because he's really want to hang out with us. Outside of that, what you really want to do is think about how to organize those to fit in a one-page type of format. Now, you don't want too much white space on there because some jobs may think you're kind of inadequate in a sense, but you also don't want too small of a text and too much text on one page because it goes back to the first argument. Nobody really wants to take the time to read that. So you want it to be visually appealing. When you look at it, it looks like there's a decent amount of information conveyed easily enough to read, something that makes me want to continue to make it through the end of this page. So, definitely start with your header, with your information as current as possible. Go in there to your next strongest argument. Some people definitely recommend putting an objective there. I haven't really used the resumes too often, but I have, of course. So I do have an objective statement on my resume, kind of really listing out what it is that I hope to accomplish. And it's more so centered around, honing on the skills that I have and building on new skills throughout the process of growth and evolution within the field. So you could definitely think about including something like that prior to, all the information about your relevant job experience and your relevant education. Now, and if you have some other education, if you went to high school or you went to college afterwards, and let's say, for example, you decided you wanted to take a certificate course or your company made you take a management class, include that if it's relevant. If it's relevant under education, definitely add that into the resume. You don't necessarily have to have a degree to consider that relevant. So if you went to a community college or a four-year institution and you didn't particularly finish, still list that, list it as working towards such degree, and then list the relevant courses that you took so that these courses are what helps you build the skills that you have now to be eligible and to be qualified for the job. So there's definitely some space to really play around with it on a resume to really put your best foot forward. Now, resumes are really kind of for people who don't participate in a lot of activities outside of work. So that includes, sometimes police officers, nurses, teachers, any of those jobs where it's not really academic based. But that's not to say that you can't take a non-academic based job and create a CV. So discussing the CV, right? The CV, again, being an expanded version, kind of an exploded version of the resume, right? It includes all the information that's relevant and non-relevant to your life and your accomplishments, right? So academic CVs typically focus on research and publications, presentations, professional organizations, and things of that nature. But let's use like this kind of hypothetical type of concepts, right? You're a plumber and you wanted to build a CV because you have a resume, and the resume is working for you, but you want this CV. So you'll take from there and expand off of these jobs you had to be at this organization, or you created your own plumbing enterprise, and you'll go down on the CV and explain parts of, maybe some affiliations you had within a plumbing union. Let's say you were a union rep or you were the union president, or you help organize union activities or events. You can add that into a theme of event planning for the union, or if you volunteer a lot through the union or other means in society, you can add your volunteer experience there. Maybe you'll volunteer for Habitat with Humanities. You may not want to put that under relevant job descriptions on a resume because there's not enough space to add that information at. But you also do want to highlight that so you can think about adding a CV to your repertoire. Maybe you might not want to use a CV every time you want to sell yourself on paper. But to start building out a CV, I think is a valuable task because teachers can do the same. Teachers who build curriculums for a school, for a 12th grade program, or they started an honors program and help build out a curriculum there. They do student advisory boards or student governments at their institutions or their high schools or wherever. They can add some of this information. If they were on multiple committees throughout the school or the school district, they definitely can add this type of information on the CV that will help really expand it. And I'm not sure personally, what teachers are using as like kind of the standard practice. But that's one way you could do it. Regardless of, which option you choose, I think you should choose the one that's going to be most appropriate for your field. However, that's not to say that a CV isn't an appropriate answer. A CV can show so much more than a resume can, and as such, can help you stand out amongst other applicants. Now, I'm not a hiring manager, so I can't say that it will. I haven't worked in hiring. However, it doesn't hurt to have an opportunity to express that in a way that stands out in the application pool compared to the standard 1,000 resumes they get. If you're the one CV, that stops them. That forced them to stop and kind of pay a little bit more attention to your profile already. So just from the beginning, just by setting up the CV, you are definitely setting yourself apart and getting that recognition you deserve, right? But let's say you chose this option to present yourself on paper, right? You build your resume or your CV out, and now you want to engage you're in the field, you're working, right? Second thing you really need to do, and I think the best way to kind of segue into it is the story of Kobe. Kobe Bryant, outside of being a phenomenal basketball player and kind of one of the most influential players to the game of all times, regardless of what side of the argument you're on, or who's the best player of all times, who's the GOAT. Kobe did one thing that I don't think any other player did, and that was create a mindset, this Mamba mentality. A lot of people know it. A lot of people heard it. But so many, I don't think understands what that means, right? That means to be the best, you have to work the hardest. You have to engage at your craft until you're perfect at certain tasks of the game. And not to say that you can't be wrong there, but you're so good that you're confident. Others are confident that put in this position, you will excel with what would look like relative ease, right? So Kobe did that. Now, if you're playing basketball or you're writing papers or you're teaching children, it's all the same principle, right? You want to be able to engage in this material day in and day out. You want to breathe it until you have this to the point where you believe you could be the best, right? And I look at it this way. If you go to work and you're cleaning floors, right? And you take a half-assed approach to it, and you sweep up, but it's still a little trash there, right? That's not a job that you're going to be able to keep long. But if you look up different ways of making the floor clean with minimum effort, eventually you'll be able to do that job so well that by the halfway through the day, you have no more work to do. Your work is working for yourself. So it can definitely make the job easier. Now, let's say, for example, right, you're at this job, but that's not your goal. That's not your passion, right? Again, you're cleaning floors, but you really want to be an artist. You really want to be a producer or something, right? Cleaning floors is just how you feed your family. So you have your normal vocations. Now you don't necessarily need to engage with that. But then you have this other goal, this other task, right? That you really need to engage with that material. When people think about starting businesses or creating side hustles or whatever it is, they have this idea and they see a lot of this information online or they hear it from friends or whatever it is. But in order to actually succeed, you need to know every step of that. Those who are the best in their field, those who made it up so high on that social ladder, spent time researching, understanding, talking to people, asking questions. What does this mean? What does that mean? How do I do this? Where can I get these resources from? And sometimes, they just always get answers from others, but a majority of the time, they learn how to find this information through text. They learn how to differentiate resources online or in books. Like, these resources are the ones that I need. These are the ones that's valid to the task that I'm trying to accomplish. And they're better at organizing this information into like these little pockets of a little knowledge hubs that they could draw from, these wells that they could access when they're trying to accomplish a goal. One good way I think about it is community colleges, right? A lot of people slam community colleges, and that's completely unjust. One of the major advantages of community college compared to four-year institutions is the flexibility of which people can pursue knowledge. You get into these four-year schools and they want you to declare a major or do this and do that, where as community college, you could go in and say, hey, I want to take a class in plumbing or HVAC, or I want to take a class in screenwriting. I want to take a class in, art history, art appreciation. You have so much you can explore. You might have to pay out of pocket for it. But what it does is collect all the information that you need as a starting point and organize it in such a way that once you go through this material, once you make it through this class and the textbook and the PowerPoint slides, you saved yourself, for the most part, 3 months to a year of individual research. And you get put on a very decent course towards figuring things out. Now, if you just stop there, right? If you stopped at that class and you think you know what you're talking about, you are dead wrong. But if you go through that book, right, and you read each chapter and you highlight every word you don't know, have that be because you just don't know the definition or because that word is specific to your industry, right? The industry you're hoping to break into or to expand in. If you highlight each of those words and then you look those words up, in there's going to be other words you don't know. If you highlight those and you look those up, you start this process where you're webbing out your knowledge. You're expanding in every direction of how much you understand about this topic. And eventually, you'll be able to start to draw these linear lines, or linear lines, same thing. You'll be able to draw these linear pathways towards accessing knowledge, just like we discussed with those who research and ask questions and draw hubs. You learn about who to ask and what to ask them. You learn about where to go to find these individuals. You'll learn about how to access forums and other type of platforms online, communities where these individuals gather, and how to pick brains. Hey, this is what I need to know for my next step. I know the big picture, I know the small starts, and I'm working towards there. How do I fill in the gaps? And the more you engage with your material, the easier that is. So that at the end of it, when you're putting this together in a resume or a CV, you have all that information that can be expressed through writing. And it'd be easier to kind of present that as you're moving on. But most importantly, by engaging in your material, you'll learn how that is transferable to so many other life skills. One, just the dedication process, right? One of the other things about Kobe outside of his amazing basketball career was the fact that he was also an incredible father, and that's not by accident. It's not happenstance that he happened to be a great basketball player and a great father. Those skills, that mindset he had, that application also translated to how he approached his fatherhood. And I can't say that for certain. I don't know Kobe. But from the outside looking in, it appears as though that same dedication, that same passion he took at being the best basketball player was also demonstrated in his desire to be the best father. And of course, we can't measure who's the best father. We can barely measure who's the best basketball player. We're horrible at trying to draw comparisons. But once you make that commitment to yourself, I want to be the best that I could possibly be at this craft, at this passion. It's almost impossible to fail. Because as you're learning these tasks, as you're gaining this information, you're going to be better and better and better at it. If you're a producer, and you learn one process of how to make beats, for example, how to engineer sound, you could do that. But once you learn the next one and the next one and the next one, you can start now manipulating all these concepts of how to do sound engineering and audio editing and beat productions to the point where you can make something that no one else has. But you can't do that until you spend enough time making it, Same things like playing games. People play games a lot. The first time you play a game like Call of Duty or Fortnite, or whatever it is that you're playing, you probably suck. There's very few people who are just naturally good at certain things. But the more you play, the more you learn and you see like, oh, I died like this. I watched the replay. I see how the guy killed me. I'm going to try this instead. Or I'm going to do what he did instead. The more you do it, the more exposure you have, the more time spent on it, the better you'll ultimately become. And that's the same thing in life, right? So all that leads me into this last discussion. After you do all that, after you mastered your craft, you became an expert, you engaged in it, into the way that Malcolm Gladwell describes in The Outliers, you have 10,000 hours in there, that 10,000 hour rule, right? You got your 10,000 hours and you put it all on paper. Now you're ready to sell yourself. The hardest part now is how to demand your wealth, how to demand your return back off of your investment. And I really have no advice on that, y'all. If you listen to some of the other episodes, there was this kind of discussion where I'm attending this conference and I didn't want to ask for funding. I didn't feel as though I was deserving of it because I wasn't presenting anything, whatever it was. But somewhere in the last couple of weeks, it clicked for me, right? There's another kind of, symposium, maybe educational opportunity hosted through the University of Michigan. Altogether, to attend for 3 weeks is about $5,000. But it goes through a bunch of different statistical analytical processes, a lot of which I really want to learn because data analysis is going to be critical as far as how my research should be conducted. A lot of research, that is the part that's the most hardest. You can write papers, you can do literature reviews, and it's an easier skill to learn for the most part. But you have to have kind of knowledge of these statistical techniques to be able to really collect data and analyze data. And that's not to devalue people who don't do statistical analysis or any of those type of quantitative or qualitative analyses. But also to say that that's the part where when you go wrong, you go real wrong, because you make inferences from there. You deduce information from it. If you write a bad paper, you didn't harm anybody just yet, and we've seen it so many times in other, publications, that people will publish information as it's not true. And once that misinformation is out there, it ruins a line of people's thinking. So I don't want to do that. That's not what I want for myself. I want to be able to do these processes. So now I'm trying to figure out how to navigate my area in the department. I know a little bit with the department chair, how he is. And, I think he's really invested in helping students. The dean of the university is also, or the dean of my school, really invested in stats. So, I'm hoping to leverage the little relationship I built with the department chair, the dean's love of statistical processes as a statistician himself, and my advisor's support as a way of getting them to pay the $5,000 so I can continue to learn. No, that's not even demanding my worth back. Part of it is, I've earned the opportunity for the school to send me to places, such as the conference that I'm paying for myself. So now this is my return. The issue is now being comfortable stepping outside of that space where I don't ask for things, where that self-made concept came from. That mentality that I also internalized in myself, that if I really could do it, I should do it. And while I can spend the $5,000, I am not going to. It's just not going to happen. There are so many other things I could spend $5,000 on. So as I update y'all, I hope in the next week or two, or next time I sit down with you, to be able to tell you, like, this is what I did, this is how it worked out, and these were some of the lessons I learned in that process. So look forward to that in the near future. But as always, before I leave, I want to get kind of real for a moment and, get this little motivation. For this one, I say, keep dreaming. It all starts with a dream. And I don't know about you, but I know about me and the community I came from, right? People were always so quick to tell me what I can't do. You can't dance, you can't sing. I can't, and I love it. Both of them, excuse me, but that belief, that internalization of all the things I can't do prevented me from exploring those passions, exploring how to become better at these objects. Maybe I would have taken a dance class. I did. Actually, I took belly dancing in undergrad, but it's neither here nor there. But I think we cancel ourselves out in the dreaming phase because the world is constantly trying to tell us that we can't, that the dream is too big, that it's not realistic. And I'm here to say that that is a lie. I know that is a lie. I know it because if you go ahead and engage in that material, if you're passionate, if you love it, there's no way you could fail. Now, like, there's some items, like some people that's just naturally better, right? There's a concept of fast twitch muscle fibers that make people better pitchers. They can throw a fastball like stupid fast. But unfortunately, a lot of times when that happens, when people are that's naturally inclined to something, they use that natural inclination as a crutch, and it actually prohibits them from becoming the best. Yeah, that fastball is super fast, but they have no curveball, no switch up. You know what I mean? Same for those people that's just naturally smart. Yeah, they're smart, but they're lazy. You know, they don't read, they don't study, they don't engage. So when they learn it, they don't forget it, but they don't learn as much as those who have to work for it does. Because they go through the books and they highlight and they understand, they look up everything that they didn't learn to get them better at this. And that's the same thing with your dreams. If you keep applying pressure, if you keep learning, you keep engaging in these crafts, and somehow through that grace and mercy of God, or whatever it is that you want to call it, you know, you're able to silence that voice in your head that has been echoed time and time again that you can't do something, that you can't be this because you're not immediately good. You're not naturally good at it. You know, if you could silence that and put that work in, you will make it. You know, I can't say you'll make it to the top, and I can't say it'll be an easy process, but I can say that it's worth trying. That if at the end of the day, if when the curtains close and life is over, nothing came out of it, at least you can say you tried your hardest to do that, to be happy, to have that every day. And for me, that's just a lot better to live with or to die with than to say that I didn't do anything at all, that I didn't try. So I don't know how you want to do it. I don't know what it is that you want to do, but whatever it is, keep dreaming. So until next time, sweet dreams.